the text that she wanted shared.
You don't have to share. I think everybody knows. You don't have to share it if you don't want.
I think, yeah, I agree with you that everybody knows this, and we will just let you play us in.
Okay, and this is a repeat, but it's also in honor of Cantor Nemi's installation.
This Saturday night.
Saturday night. It's a little Bach lead into a very familiar piece for CBST.
Spectacular, Adria. You are such a deep and wonderful gift that we get to receive when you play. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And bravo to Cantor Nemi, I've learned so much from him in this class, and I'm looking forward to his installation.
Yes, indeed.
And information about Cantor Nemi's installation was sent out via email today.
Yes.
Rabbi.
Yes, before we just start Psalm 13, I just want to encourage people. Somebody said to me that they feel intimidated to speak in this class because so many people seem to know so much. Let me just say again to encourage people, whoever you are, whatever your background, this isn't a class where I'm going to call on people and force people to speak, because for some people, it's not comfortable to speak in public, and that is totally fine. But I really want to encourage people, if you want to say something or ask a question or participate in a way you have not yet participated, either verbally or on the chat, or trying to write something or draw something, I encourage you to really push yourself just a little iota. And for those who participate a lot, let's try and make sure we're making room for people who don't tend to speak, and to make sure we're really encouraging. And this is an awkward format, and I know some folks are here just to listen, and that really feeds them. What I don't want is to people feel like they don't belong by being more visible or vocal or in any way participation. even though I hope this is obvious, I'll say this again and again and again. There is no such thing as a stupid comment or a stupid question about what we're studying. Nothing, it doesn't exist. Every time you ask a question or think a thought, it's studying Torah, whatever level it's at, reflecting whatever background you have, and everything is welcome. I just want you to hear that from me. I'll keep repeating it. Just everybody is welcome. And you see in the writings that people bring parts of themselves that in some cases have nothing to do with Judaism, the music backgrounds, the understanding of language, or academic backgrounds that have nothing to necessarily do originally with the Psalms, but that lens opens up worlds for all of us. I can promise you, I promise, that if you have a reaction, either it's a question or a doubt or an insight or confusion, other people have it also, especially around the questions and confusions. If I'm not clear or if something's confusing, don't hesitate to ask either in the chat and Harold will make sure I know about it, or raise your hand in the conversation to say you didn't understand something or it went by too fast or can I explain it again? So I'm just sending out a general encouragement, and everybody is welcome, whatever your background. That's what this point of this community of learners is about. Okay? And I know some of you joined after we began and you might have questions that you think, oh, it's obvious or got covered. Don't worry, ask it again. I bet you a lot of people have forgotten. Even if I said something back in April, I don't assume everybody remembers everything. Okay, so please feel loved and supported to ask or say whatever's on your mind. And again, the chat makes it really easy. So you don't, if you feel like you can't get into the verbal stuff, but I just want to encourage people. Okay, everybody, you got it? Okay, great. So
and Rabbi, maybe we could consider another morning session for newcomers or Ask the Rabbi Anything, which have been
great idea. Happy to do that, and would love to do that.
All right. So for the first time since September 28th, when we started Psalm 12, we have a new Psalm. And if we're going to do a read through, Rabbi, if that's okay, yes. I had asked Sarah Sloan to be our Hebrew reader today.
Okay.
And newcomer Ann Targovnik to be our English reader.
Great.
Okay with both? Okay, so let's see. And are you okay, Sarah?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, should I start?
Read away.
למנצח מזמור לדוד. עד אנה אדוני תשגיחני נצח, עד אנה תסתיר את פניך ממני. עד אנה עשית עצות בנפשי. Wait, the chat is obscuring it. בנפשי, יגון בליבי יומם, עד אנה ירום אויבי עלי. Habita anani Adonai Elohai, ha'ira einai pen ishat hamavet. Can you go down?
Down or up? Here, how's this?
This is the beginning. I need to see the next few.
Okay, hold on. There's something wrong with the share. Hold on just 1 second and I'll pull it back up again. Is this better? Can you see the bottom now?
Yes, thank you. Ad ana asita etzot b'nafshei yagan b'livi yomam ad ana yarum oivai alai. Habita eneneni Adonai Elohai ha'ira einai pen ishan hamavet. Pen yomar oivi yachliti sarei yagilu ki emot. Vani b'chashtecha batachti. Yagali bibi Yeshuatecha, Ashira Ladonai, Ki Gamal Alai.
Thank you.
And Ann Targovnik, are you available to unmute yourself and read the English for us?
I am available, and thank you, Sarah. That was fabulous. I can read Mizmor LeDavid, but I'll take it from there. How long, O Lord, will you ignore me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long will I have cares on my mind, grief in my heart all day? How long will my enemy have the upper hand? Look at me, answer me, O Lord, my God. Restore the luster to my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say, I have overcome him. My foes exult when I totter. But I trust in your faithfulness. My heart will exult in your deliverance. I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me.
Excellent. Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Sarah. So let me just do a little introduction to the psalm, and we'll now work through it. And for those who are new and joining the class, always remember that any given translation is an interpretation, and we're not presenting any translation as the final or the complete or the exhaustive understanding. And so we will look at multiple translations as all different kinds of interpretations, and we will layer, starting with the most, shall we say, attempt to get at the literal, and then keep going to see how different commentators and writers respond to it. So that's the first thing. We're not presenting this translation as anything in particular, except that it's in Sepharia. So there's no... So that's the first thing. The next thing is, how long is this psalm? Let's zoom out, look at the architecture a little bit. 6 verses. That's very short. We've only read one other psalm so far besides in the book Big Read, but we've only studied one other psalm that's 6 verses. And that was, anybody remember? Psalm 23. Psalm 23, that iconic, most famous of psalms, is also an extremely brief one. In its Gettysburg Address, how much it gets into those 6 verses. And likewise, Psalm 13 is a very short psalm. 6 is pretty much the shortest, and it still has a very clear structure and architecture. So that's one thing, zooming out, looking at it. We always look first at how long the psalm is, how many verses, knowing that in Catholic and Protestant Bibles, the numbering of psalms is different. So this is really talking about the Jewish Bible only. The other thing we notice in looking at the big picture of the psalm is that there is a superscription. They don't all have that, right? Let's remember that. They don't all have it. But Lama Netzeach Mizmor LeDavid, for the leader, a psalm of David. Some people see that as part of the psalm. Like this translation absolutely sees it as the first verse. But many see it really as a superscription, a title, or, as we've talked about, directions. Sometimes it's musical instruction, perhaps. Sometimes it's just, maybe it's an attribution, who wrote it. We don't really know, so we have to do a lot of different guesses, but just kind of looking at the big pictures. So 6 verses, there's this superscription, Lama Netzeach Mizmor LeDavid, which we've come across before. Lama Netzeach is some kind of leader, perhaps, and this is, I'd say, there is some consensus around this, but again, since this is from 2,500 years ago and we have no contemporary speakers of the language of this psalm, even if we have Israelis who speak contemporary Hebrew, they are not speaking the Hebrew that was spoken when these psalms were written. Lama Netzeach probably is some kind of musical leader. It's not the political leader or even the religious leader. It's likely the musical conductor or leader that we don't know for sure. But we've seen it many times. And Mizmor, in this case, a translator isn't even attempting to translate it, just calling it a psalm. And that's a translation, but it's also the title of what these pieces of what this literature is. So Mizmor is some kind of song. It's not, and that is in the word psalm itself, which is not in the original, in the Hebrew of this book. Remember Tehillim, the word for Sefer Tehillim, this book of what we translate as psalms. In the Hebrew, there's no reference to it being musical songs, but Mizmor sure sounds that Zion, Mem, Resh, Shoresh, has the shoresh, the root, absolutely indicates some kind of musical expression. Okay, so Lama Netzeach, for the leader, a psalm, Mizmor LeDavid. Now, David, I'm just going to repeat these, just overview very briefly. A psalm of David, does it mean King David wrote these traditions for Orthodox and very traditional Jews? Some think that many of these were written by David. But so many of these psalms are we can identify as being much later than when David himself lived. It's sure unlikely, and more likely it might be like according to a style of David, kind of like in a Bauhaus style, we would say. It doesn't mean a particular architect designed a particular building. If you're talking about something in a Bauhaus style, anybody who's an architect who's a student of Bauhaus can theoretically design a Bauhaus style building, right? So this is Mizmor LeDavid. Maybe it's in the style or in the school of David. So once we leave that first line of 3 words, the psalm itself is 5 sentences, and it is a very powerful psalm. I also want to repeat, we haven't talked about in a while, that there are different categories of psalms, which I think, given those of you who participated in the big read, you really got a sense of. So there are some psalms that we consider psalms of gratitude or praise. And those are the otherwise known as the Yay God psalms, right? The psalms that are very upbeat, and they're the psalms that most of the Psukei de Zimra psalms of the morning prayers include, psalms of praise and of celebration and of gratitude and of appreciation. Then there are historical psalms that kind of tell, within the psalm we see some kind of historical description of a moment in time. Then there are psalms of lamentation and psalms of petition. Psalms of lamentation, of sadness, of despair, of the very opposite of the psalms of exaltation and of praise and of joy are the psalms of lamentation. And psalms of petition overlap. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different. Psalms asking for something. So those are the big categories of psalms. And now that you've read through a lot of the psalms, you really start to identify them. Some psalms have multiple pieces to them. Some psalms are dominantly psalms of praise, but have a little something else. Some psalms are dominantly psalms of lamentation, but have a little something else. So it's, of course, these are just categories that help us to understand these 150 psalms that make up the book of Psalms, as you've seen, span the human, emotional, and spiritual range like no other book that I know. You can find, no matter where you are, you can find a psalm that reflects that emotional range. So this is one, along with Psalm 6, which we've done, and we're going to look at Psalm 6 a little bit as we look at Psalm 13, and on your own this afternoon, if you want to look back at Psalm 6. Psalm 6 and Psalm 13 are seen as really classic psalms of despair, psalms that are done in moments of great sadness and fear and anxiety. Now we've read some psalms, like Psalm 12 was very much identifying all the evil in the world. This psalm, and some psalms are very deeply personal. They're clearly, who is the speaker? Is the speaker speaking from their own voice and speaking directly to God? Is the speaker speaking about God? All these are questions that you've all gotten some rhythm to asking and understanding in looking at a psalm. And so Psalm 6 and Psalm 13 share a lot. And this one is considered the one done, we say a lot in times of great trouble and times of great fear. And let's read it now, so we'll see it as it fits into the bigger picture, but as it stands on its own. So verse 2. So verse 1 is either a superscription or the first of 6, but we're going to start looking at this as 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's how many verses? 5 verses that I want to look at the architecture of. Remember also, biblical Hebrew traditional poetry starts with, or prose, any biblical Hebrew, the standard writing starts with a verb. And if that's not true, it means the author is making a point. It's for emphasis. Just like in English, we start with a noun. I ate the cookie. We start with the pronoun I. Ate, the verb is usually second, the direct object, etc. If I were to say, ate I the cookie, all of a sudden it sounds a little poetic, and I'm focusing on the eating part. And there's a little bit of to an native English speaker, if you hear the sentence, ate I the cookie, you'll know that sentence is not normal. I keep saying this because it's very hard for those of us who are native English speakers to appreciate biblical Hebrew when it does the emphasis, sounds more like English, so it looks more normal to us. And that's why I keep talking about this, because it's hard to remember. So, ad ana. Ad means until, or up into, or ad has a lot of different, but let's say until. Ana, until when? Translated here, how long? Now, what name of God is used is always important. So this is the Yud He Vav He, the 4-letter name of God. Harold, would you just, for those who are not Hebrew readers, just so that you see that, this 4-letter name of God, again, Yud He Vav He, this is the Tetragrammaton, the Shem HaMeforesh, the big name of God. Again, the most powerful, the name that has no meaning that we know, except maybe it means to breathe, maybe it means to be, maybe it means, as it says in the book of Exodus, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. So, ad ana, how long or until when, Yud He Vav He, the source of my existence. Yud He Vav He is the one who breathed the breath into me. So speaking very directly, not about God, not some theoretical theology, direct, very personal, very much a plea, ad ana, until when, Yud He Vav He. I'm speaking directly to you, the one who breathed life into me, until when, tishkacheni, you will forget me. Shin kaf chet shoresh means to forget. So how long, Yud He Vav He, will you forget me? Netzach, where the Netzach, now this is interesting. So where is the shoresh with Netzach seen elsewhere in this psalm? Lamanatseach. If you look up in for the conductor, for the leader. So Netzach has a lot of different, so there we see the same shoresh. Netzach can mean forever, as it says here, or victory or eternity. So there's some sense, how long will you forget me forever? It's kind of a strange sentence, right? It feels like I am totally forgotten. It has an emphasis. Again, looking under the word netzach, you see the etnachta, the trup mark, the ta'am, the cantillation mark. That is the semicolon. We know biblical parallelism in biblical poetry. Every line in a standard way has 2 phrases, and those 2 phrases relate to each other. So the first phrase is ad ana yud he vav he tishkacheni netzach. Until when? How long, God, will you forget me forever? Semicolon. Ad ana, until when? And then there's a pause, but after the next, so you see in this biblical parallelism, sometimes we've described that the verses have 3 different, the second part of the second phrase of the verse can either repeat in a different way, meaning the same thing, can repeat in a different way, which is kind of an antithesis, or can repeat in a way that is escalating in intensity, I might say, kind of making it stronger or more powerful. In this case, the first phrase of both halves of this verse is the same. Ad ana yud he vav he tishkacheni netzach. Ad ana tastir et panecha mimeni. So you can hear the rhythm of it. Ad ana gets repeated. And in the English, this translator repeats how long both times to mirror that. So for the second phrase, so the first phrase is, how long, ad ana yud he vav, will you forget me? Can there be something more painful than to feel unseen by the one who has made us? We all know what it's like to feel unseen or lost by human beings and people we love, or feel like somebody doesn't understand us or really get us. But this is, how long, Yud He Vav He, do you forget us? Ad ana tastir. Samach tet reish, no, samach taf reish is the shoresh, which means to hide or to be, depending on the declension, to be hidden. It's the shoresh, the root of the name Esther. Esther from the story of Purim means hidden. So this, we've seen this phrase before a little bit, and it's and I'm sure as you did the big read, tastir et panecha is very common, or a version of that God's face, how long will you hide your face, panecha mimeni, from me? So key in this is that this jumps right in. There is almost no ramp up to a sense of complete loneliness, a sense of being alone and of despair and of saying, how long will you forget me? How long will you hide your face from me? The sense we have of relating to the power in the universe in Jewish tradition and in theology and in Psalms is we can experience Yud He Vav He, the source of holiness in the world, either by experience the presence of holiness or by experiencing absence. And in Jewish theology and in thought, experiencing God's absence is as powerful as experiencing God's presence. And part of the power of that is to say, it's not that God does not exist, but there are moments in our lives and in history where God's absence is more powerful, more resonant than God's presence. And learning how to use that language, once it becomes more natural, becomes a very, very clear way to talk about the world. Okay, let's go on to verse 3. Notice it starts with the same phrase, ad ana. In English, we don't like to repeat ourselves. Again, Hebrew likes to, and we see in some poetry, the repetition, of course, of words has power. Ad ana, again, not starting with a verb, starting with ad ana. So there's a rhythm to it. Until when? And they translated how long? Asit etzot benafshi yagon bilvavi yomam. How long will I have atzot? Is it atzot or etzot? Etzot benafshi yagon bilvavi yomam. I will have etzot is like cares or ideas that benafshi, in my soul or mind, they're translating. Yagon bilvavi yomam, and sighing or grief in my heart. Yomam, like yom, all day. Now this verse, just like verse 1, repeats the biblical parallelism. The second part, the second phrase, ad ana. Again, this is the fourth time we have this phrase in 2 verses. Until when? Yarum oivi alai. Until when will those who are my enemies, who are against me, who are crushing me, will be above me, alai, on top of me or over me? How long will I be crushed? Will I be pushed down? How long will I feel no agency, no power? How long will I be powerless? Okay, I just want to stop with those 3 verses just to see if there are comments or questions or clarifications.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I haven't looked at
As Rocky, I believe, has gone. She had her hand up and said she needed to leave. We had a question from I believe, Ruth. Why ad ana rather than ad matai?
So we'll have to ask that question as a class. Ad matai, if you look back in in Psalm 6, we see the phrase ad matai in Psalm 6 verse 4. You could look back on you could write it down and look back. We have the same, v'nafshi nivhala ma'od, my soul is terrified, v'ata yud he vav he ad matai. So both phrases get used. We'll explore, what do they mean to us? How would we understand it?
And then
Great question. They both get used throughout Tehillim.
Randy Sarkoff, whose personal psalm is 27, says verse 2, phrase 2 is the same as a verse in Psalm 27.
Yes, do you want to tell us about that?
Randy?
Well, the Hebrew words are similar. I noticed 2 of the letters were different. But in Psalm 27, it's don't hide your face from me, is how we've, at least one of the translations. Yep. And here long is how long will you hide your face from me?
this phrase of hidden face is really a common one throughout Tehillim. And it really reflects this very powerful sense of being in the shadows, being in the cold, being out of God's presence. So it does get used in multiple places.
Karen Kropp has her hand up.
Hi. I think it's interesting the ordering of verse 2 and verse 3. You know, you jump in with this sort of such strong, profound, how long will you ignore me forever? And, you know, seems like more typically we have a kind of verse 3 first, like I have cares on my mind, I have grief in my heart,
Yep.
my enemies have the upper hand. And then you get to this sort of,
Right.
how long will you ignore me? So I just, you know, I don't, you know, I think that's really interesting, the way that that is what comes first this time. And
I
then
agree.
you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
why you feel that way. So just an
Yeah.
observation.
I think it's coming from that very deep sense of, you could feel the crying, you could feel the despair, you could feel the sense of agony. And
Which-
it's very emotional. I think it's very emotionally resonant that way. Thanks, Karen.
And Lori Krotman said in chat, I sobbed when I read this psalm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Randy Axelrod.
It's amazing to me how the ending a sentence in one way can be so profound, at least to me, because in Levi, he has how long Adonai as the first sentence, and then the rest of the phrase is the second sentence. And to me, it just makes it 10 times more dramatic. I mean, over the course of the last few days, I've heard friends say over and over about this pandemic.
Yeah.
How long
Yeah.
long is this going to last? So it just had a, you know, a big effect on me, the way it was
I
phrased.
think that's a very powerful comment you're making. And the commentators discuss this, that this is a psalm that's not talking about some things that are bad, are one-time events that happen to us, right? It could be, you know, the death of somebody we love. It's profound. It's a one-time event, and it's how long can we feel the grief, but it's a one-time event. There are one-time events that are terrible. There's a sense in this psalm, which is, I think, why the COVID business we can feel the echoes of. There's a sense of this psalm. This isn't a one-time event, as bad as any one-time event can be, and they can be terrible. This is a feeling like something that's some terrible things that go on for a long time. Yep. Thank you.
Sherry Dratfield.
Yeah, I was really struck, and for the first time, because I've been studying my Hebrew, I actually went back to the Hebrew in the second verse and carrying on what we've been talking about. It says, "How long, Lord, semicolon, will you ignore me forever?" Question mark. But if you go back to the Hebrew, the et nata is after forever or always. So it's almost like, how long will you ignore me forever? Which is a little conflicting. How long will you ignore me forever?
Yeah.
If you do it all together, it's almost like, I don't know. I don't know, but it's.
I think
to
that's
me-
an expression of such deep despair, right? The speaker has already decided it's forever. Doesn't it feel that way? Like
Yeah.
don't we all know what that feels like? That feels like, even whatever it is, whether it's grief or sadness or being stuck in addictive patterns or whatever the bad thing is, we don't feel like we can see outside of ourselves. We feel like it's going to be forever. And that's the hard thing, is to know when you're in the middle of something bad or difficult, that it might not be forever. And it's very hard if somebody says to you, "Oh, don't worry, you know, you'll get out of this or you'll move on," right? That really helps, huh? Really helps when somebody says, "Oh, don't worry, you'll feel better in a couple of weeks." It doesn't help, because when you're in there,
That's
it
right.
feels like it's never going to change.
Which is why it seemed so powerful to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Monica Raymond makes a similar point in chat. She says, "Ignore me forever" has the answer in it to how long. The answer is forever. Very bizarre and neurotic. Questioner has already decided that it's forever.
Well, I think that's a human truth. I think that's how we function. And I think that that's one of the pieces that we've been talking about. What is faith? Or somebody talked about what Rabbi Moskowitz taught today in classes. How do you feel joy or feel a sense of possibility when you're in the middle of terrible things? Like how do you diminish the time? You know, everybody falls down. We know that, right? So how do you diminish the time between falling down and getting back up? How do you diminish the time of being in the pit? How do you diminish the time of feeling like God's completely absent? And that takes muscles that have to be developed, and and it's not easy.
And some other comments in chat that if you're in the middle of despair, it feels like you've been suffering forever and will continue to suffer forever. And Lori Spear says, in that expression, ad ana, how long, grief, despair, frustration, and anger are all contained in that one exclamation.
Yep.
And Ruthie Berman has her hand up.
I must take credit for writing this.
Oh, that's great, Ruthie.
It's exactly how I am feeling today.
Yeah.
I was brought up in a home where you must have faith in God. There is no other direction to take.
Mm-hmm.
And as I get older and as I have experienced what I have experienced, this fits so well that I have the chills, my heart is pounding. And I must say that number 3 is what fits so amazingly. How long will I have cares on my mind, grief in my heart all day? How long will my enemy have the upper hand?
Yeah.
And that is why I am so grateful for everyone in this Zoom, for the Psalms, for you, and thank you, Harold. It has been an extraordinary morning for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Ira.
Hi. I have a slightly different kind of question, really, and maybe the cantors can weigh in on this. But I'm wondering about the line separator in some of the verses. For example, in the second verse, there's the line separating the second ad ana from tastir. And that comes after the eknata, which is already a separator.
Right. So it's another.
So I was
it's called the pasik.
I'm sorry.
It's called the pasik, which is another pause. There are different pauses. Yeah.
So I just had a thought as I was looking at this. Has there been any speculation at all that this could have something to do with a musical marking in terms of something for the Lamnatseach, how to something about the musical presentation of this?
Rabbi, may I?
Yes, please do.
So I don't know about a musical indication. I can tell you that the trope mark above it, I believe, is a shalshelet above the word ana in that verse. And there are a couple of different kinds of shalshelet. And so the pasek or pasik, depending on dialect, that vertical line after is actually part of the trope mark. It basically makes it a slightly longer pause. So it just differentiates. If you have it without the line after, it's a slightly shorter pause than if you have it with it after. I don't know about musical indication, though, off the top of my head.
Yeah, and just remember, as Cantor Nimi has taught us, we don't really know what the musical sounds are to this cantillation system at all. Right. Like we have traditions for the musical cantillation of other systems. So we know what we're using the words to describe these cantillation notes, these marks, because they're the same looking notes that exist for other systems, but we don't actually know anything about what they sound like.
Because it just seems to me like some of these pasiks, what did you call them? Pasik? Seem to be placed in a very, linguistically in very strange places.
Well, I wouldn't say this is strange. Actually, I would say if I were reading this, for instance, ad ana, until when, and kind of a pause. Ad ana, a pause. You know, I get it. It could be music, and music works that way too, right? So there's an emphasis on you don't move quickly. So I think even reading it, but I would for sure, if this were set to music, you would hear a pause. I don't think it's strange grammatically. I do think it's because it's saying ad ana. You know,
Right, but what about something like va'ani b'chastecha?
right, va'ani, and I, oh, and me, oh, you know, we have that in other places too. It's like, and me, and I, focusing on it, so it really emphasizes the very deeply personal, and especially again, we'll get to that.
I think we have time for 2 more questions, and then we're going to have to wrap up for today. Karen Brody, please unmute yourself.
I think I did.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay, good. First of all, I just want to thank Rabbi Kleinbaum. The way you presented this was just, it came alive to me for the first time in my life. I've never had Psalm study before, and I so appreciate CBST for introducing me to it. And the way you described, the way you talk of this Psalm today just made it so real to me, so alive, so vivid. And I want to thank you for that so very much.
Thank you. You're
It's
welcome.
it's really very, very beautiful. And then as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, what does it feel like to people to not be ignored?
Mm-hmm.
And what does it feel like to live a life where you are being ignored? Does it mean that your wishes are not answered? Does it mean that there is a feeling of being beloved when you feel God's love on you? I think, you know, it's maybe it's different for all of us when we feel the love of God and when we don't. That's
beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And Yael Bat Chava for the last question of the day.
So another question, I have a thought about ad ana. So the word ad does have a time frame to it. Ad is until, but the word ana is really about place. You say, where do you go? Le'an are you going, right? So ad ana feels like it has more than one dimension. It's not just a time dimension, it's also a place dimension, which it makes the despair even bigger. How much, how far will I be
beautiful
forgotten? Or
I've never thought about that, Yael, but I love that. Yep, it's really makes it multi-dimensional. It's that feeling of everywhere. You know, the time and space is a feeling of being lost, not just, very powerful.
So
so today Thursday?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So we're going to be looking, we're going to finish this translation, this introductory, and then go to Levi on Monday as well. So if over the weekend, and I really encourage you, if you have a chavruta, a study partner, or want to find somebody in the class over the weekend to read through the Psalm again, and then read through Levi's translation, that's what we'll look at on Monday, or read it by yourself. I think, Harold, you included that, right?
Yes, a few housekeeping things. But yes, I did email out everyone last night this text and all of the translations. I have seen people in the chat asking for me to make it larger. I try to balance being able to see everything on my screen and making the text as large as possible. It's only one page. If you have a printer at home or can get a printout, you may want to print it out and be following along at home.
Agree.
You're not relying on my screen. And again, I will send out an email that has all of the resources, but at this point, everyone in this class should have at least one text that has the Hebrew in it, and they can flip back and forth. So that's number one. Number two is, I do see people as their hands go in chat, they go in participants in the order in which you click your little button, and I try to recognize people in order, and sometimes we just can't get to everybody. Number three is, I can tell from the interest in the Psalm, we're gonna have a lot of personal offerings about Psalm 13. And next week we will set a deadline, and I would really, and Anik and I really have to be firm about keeping to the deadlines and asking people to only send us one version. We had some past deadline things and we had quite a few revisions on Psalm 12. We really want to help you and we really want everyone's voice to be heard, but it just makes it a little difficult for us. So those are my housekeeping issues for today. Peter Klein says, did I provide the link to Cantor Nemi's installation? I sent an email out this morning just about Cantor Nemi's installation with a link if you check your email.
And it's in the Psalm, and it's in the Psalm Facebook group also.
It's on Facebook also. And I guess since it's Thursday, we should wish everybody an early Shabbat Shalom and tell them that this is our World AIDS Day Shabbat, and we have some very special programming tomorrow.
Yeah, and I should say, if you can sign on 30 minutes at 6 o'clock, we're going to be doing the slideshow of different photographs that people have submitted of those who have died from AIDS and some images from the CBST book. So that's going to start from 6 to 6:30. We're going to do that slideshow. And Shep Wanen is lighting candles tomorrow night to represent those in our community who are long-term survivors of people who are living with AIDS. So Shep's going to represent all of, and a Psalms class member is going to be lighting the candles, hopefully not in space or on the Golden Gate Bridge. Right, Shep?
So with that,
on Earth.
With that, we will have Adria play us out. And I'm going to put something in chat that was a special offering from Joan Friedman that I think everybody might want to take a look at as Adria is playing us out. So thank you, everybody, for such a fascinating discussion. And we'll see you on Monday. Well, we'll see you on Friday, tomorrow night at services, and we'll see you Monday back here. Okay, Rabbi?
Yes. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow night at Shul. Thank you so much, Adria. Love and blessings to everyone. Thank you. The room will stay open for some minutes for those who want to hang out and talk a little bit, and see everybody in Shul tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. Bye-bye. Early Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.